you open and talking, you've actually visited my neck of the woods, the Islamic State of Minnesota, Little Mogadishu, and you've made some observations I want to ask you about. Let me just say to my audience that, I've lived here all my life, and I'm very aware that back in the 1990s, President Bill Clinton brought, eventually there would be 100,000 Somalis in this region. Didn't start out at 100,000. You came and visited my area, and just tell me what you found.
Well, Jan, I did, and several times. I've been there in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and frankly, in the beginning, I was shocked by what I found. Basically, unassimilated in many cases, Somali Muslim communities who really aren't showing, not every Somali there, but many are not showing much of an interest in assimilating, in integrating. And what we have there, Jan, as you know so well, is basically a terror pipeline that has developed from Minnesota to Somalia and to Iraq and Syria. We've had dozens of young Somali Muslims, U.S. citizens, leave their comfortable homes in Minnesota and travel overseas to join terror groups in recent years. Now, first it was the Somali-based group Al-Shabaab, but now the magnet is ISIS. And you know, Jan, in one of my recent visits to the Twin Cities, and I talk about this in the book, I interviewed the former sheriff of Ramsey County, where the city of St. Paul is. And he told me, Eric, here's how it works. An ISIS recruiter will go into a local mosque or maybe a local rec center, and he'll target 18, 19, 20-year-old Somali kids. At first, the recruiter will befriend them, and then the radicalization process starts. And Jan, this is what they tell them. Look, come to the caliphate, come to the Islamic State. You will be at the vanguard of a great new Islamic empire. You will be famous. Everyone will know your name. You'll be a glorious holy warrior. Well, this has proven a very alluring message, not only for young Somali men, but young Somali girls in the Twin Cities as well. So I think it shocks a lot of people, Jan. People think New York City, L.A., Chicago, but no, Jihad Central right now in the United States is in the Twin Cities.
Those of us who live here are very, very painfully well aware of it, and we know the exact neighborhoods and issues like that. We know some of the local mosques are involved in some of the issues that we're talking about. Again, this started back in the 90s, and they're very vulnerable to ISIS propaganda. Some of the things I've learned from your book as well. Here's the point I think that the listeners need to understand, Erica, and that is, 100,000 Somalis in the Twin Cities area, but they could be coming to a neighborhood near every listener. Help them understand that.
Well, look, you have a refugee resettlement program, Jan, which you referenced, where the U.S. government is bringing in thousands of refugees from Muslim countries, places like Somalia. And look, Minneapolis, St. Paul are kind of ground zero for this, but we have large Somali communities in Nashville, in San Diego, in Boston, in Portland, Maine, of all places. Even some rural communities, we now have this Somali population growing. And Jan, the problem is, again, assimilation, integrating, and becoming a part of the American fabric. My fear is what we see developing in some of these Somali communities around the country, particularly in Minnesota, is that we have the Europe effect. We've seen what's happened in Germany, France, Great Britain, where we have these large, unassimilated Muslim populations. They become breeding grounds for radicalism. My fear is that we're seeing the same thing in the Somali communities here in the United States.
Okay, let me ask you a real specific question, which you may not have the most thorough answer to, simply because I think you'd have to be a total insider to have an answer to the question. But how safe do you think our airports are around the country from a kind of infiltration from some of these folks?
Well, we've had cases, Jan, where we've had people who are employees at airports here in the United States, including at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. Who have worked for airlines or for the airport, who may have sensitive security access, who may be able to get on to the planes, etc. So that's a big concern without a doubt. And remember, airplanes remain the holy grail for every Islamic terrorist group from ISIS to Al-Qaeda and beyond because of the sheer damage you can cause, not only physically, we saw obviously on 9/11 what airplanes can do, but psychologically and economically. That would destroy another major airborne attack, could very well destroy the airline industry or at least make a very big dent into it. ISIS knows this, and people won't want want to fly.
That's
There'll be
right.
the element of psychological terror. So it remains definitely the main target for the jihadist movement. Airplanes, they are obsessed with them, and they'll never stop trying to hijack them and blow them up.
This is a single thing that concerns me as much as I travel. I know Eric travels a lot, and I certainly travel a lot, a couple hundred days a year, and wondering how good the security is and how good is the vetting that's going on with the employees. And you kind of look at the airports, and I look at Seattle often because I fly in and out of Seattle. I fly in and out of Minneapolis and Dallas and other places, and you wonder how good that security is. You would have thought we would have learned a little better lesson at 9/11, but that lesson seems to have faded away. One point I want to make while I've got the mic is this, before we get too far away from it. The people who are being recruited by ISIS just aren't the poor, those who have nothing in life at all. You know, we were told by our politicians that we need training centers out there in these third world countries where Islam is the only thing that attracts people, but it is the brilliant students as well who are attracted to this because they are following the Quran to the T. These are the most orthodox of the Muslims on the planet. They're the ones who want to follow what ISIS is saying because they believe that ISIS is actually following the model that Muhammad set. Am I right, Eric?
Thank you for mentioning that. This needs to be said. Great point. Back in February, President Obama went in front of the cameras and said that the jihadists are doing what they're doing because of legitimate grievances. There's a lack of economic opportunity in the Muslim world, according to the president, and that's why they're doing what they're doing. Well, guess what? In the book, I detail case after case of how medical students, people on the dean's list at distinguished universities, kids from middle-class suburban communities right here in the West have gone and joined ISIS not because of poverty, but because of ideology. This jihadist ideology, ISIS epitomizes it. Look, they have declared the caliphate. This has been the great dream of every Islamic radical for nearly a century, to reestablish that Islamic caliphate, that Islamic state in the heart of the Middle East. ISIS has done exactly that. They've done it in a bold and really audacious manner, and they're unafraid. They're challenging the West, and this success breeds attraction. They control some 35,000 square miles of territory in the heart of the Middle East, an area the size of Great Britain. All of that, combined with their social media strategy, has made ISIS really, I believe, the most successful terrorist movement in history. They are an unheard of beast with what they're doing right now.